So marketing is at the heart of every business. And so a good marketing person has to be a good communicator. At the end of the day, the society looks at the value that you bring. That's what you're paid for. You're only paid for the value you bring. At every point in time, you should get the value for who you have become. I learned the principle of disagree and commit. Being able to separate emotion from work. I find that that's something that a lot of people...
I think it's a big problem,
yeah,
actually.
a lot of people tend to struggle with.
Yeah.
And I feel it comes from how you see yourself. Perfectionism is a form of procrastination as well. You're trying to get it perfect, and therefore you haven't done it. If you're a marketing person and you're not talking to consumers every day, you're not really doing your job.
Correct.
Because your job is that consumer space.
Correct.
Trends are changing. What are people talking about? The fact that you are high up there doesn't mean that the guy who people will consider to be at the lower level is not going to be able to teach you something. And when you're like that with people, I think they trust you more.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories and Journeys, where we explore the transformative power of learning, growth, and resilience. Join us as we uncover untold narratives and ignite curiosity. My name is Oluwatimileyin Oyedeji, and joining us here today is an amazing, well-seasoned marketing communication professional. He has over 2 decades of experience within the industry, and he currently occupies a very fantastic role as the marketing director West Africa for Danone. He's no other person than Gbolahan Sanni.
Thank you very much, Timile. When I hear the hypes, thanks for the opportunity. Good
Super
to chat.
excited to have you.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I know you have a very tight schedule.
Yeah.
Shuffling between Nigeria and Ghana.
Yeah.
You know, just to ensure that you are able to move the business forward. You know, but what has that journey been like for you? You know, in the past almost 2 years now, we've done one as the marketing.
I mean, Danone for most people is fan milk. You know, it's an exciting business. We have 11,000 salesmen on the streets. They push the carts, they ride the bicycle.
Yeah.
So,
11,
I mean, again, yes, 11,000 of them. That's in Nigeria and Ghana. Maybe you have 6,000 to 7,000. We're also in Togo, we're in Benin, we're in Cote d'Ivoire as well. And so it's a very unique route to market. You know, we sell super yogo, fan yogo, in depending on the market, fan ice on the streets. So it's a very exciting business. And, you know, for me, the journey has been an interesting one. It's getting down into the nitty-gritty of the details, driving physical availability for your product, making sure that people can buy, that you have the right portfolio, that you have the right price. You know,
True.
if I start talking about price now, we'll talk about it for the next you know, couple of hours, because that's important from a consumer perspective. So Fan Milk is a part of Danone, which is then, you know, a French organization that has a global footprint. So it's the world's leader in yogurts and a couple of other consumer categories. So I mean, it's been a very interesting journey for me. You know, life, career is about connecting dots. So these are beautiful dots to connect back to everything else in my career. So I'm enjoying it. It's
Speaking about connecting dots, I think some years ago you started off as a salesman with Unilever.
Yeah.
When you connect the dots, or maybe let me reel it out this way. From being a salesman at Unilever to working with Bates Cote, an agency at the time. You then moved to work with Diageo, the beer category Guinness. You also worked on IPS, Johnny Walker. Then went to work with Coca-Cola. You know, did some fantastic job there with Coca-Cola at the time. You know, you then went from there to work with one of the biggest telcos in Nigeria, Airtel. You know, looking at the journey, has it been intentional? You know, obviously connecting the dots with how you started off with sales. Obviously, you need so much of that sales activation experience, what you do now. You know, but in connecting the dots, you know, has it been intentional for you?
I think for me, it's, you know, you want to be able to say, who am I as an individual? You know, what do I like? And it's a journey of exploring, you know, what you bring forth. So for me, one thing is I'm wary of comfort zones, you know. So when I feel like I'm getting too comfortable, then the question is, hey, what's the new challenge? What do I want to do next? So if I connect it back, I mean, for me, my career started in sales. Now, Unilever, I was serving, in just at the time. And
as a corps member?
Yes, as a youth corper. And it's interesting because there was the people that I served with, there were a lot of people who were really not doing anything. You know how it is when you serve. You kind of find a way to really not work and just but I really wanted to work. And so the role at Unilever was a sales role. I was part of a team called the MDI teams, Market Development and Impact. So you go into the market, you kind of fill in the gaps that the salesmen have left. So you're selling all of those products, Royco, Omo, Vaseline, Blue Band. And I think sales is it brings you out of your shell. You get what I mean? You have to sell. You have to go and talk to someone. You have to convince them. You have to follow certain steps to be able to sell and close the sales and all of that. So for me, that helped me understand humility, because when you work for a company and you're going to meet a market woman, it doesn't matter how much you have or how much she has. You're not richer than her. You know, for all intents and purposes, you're trying to get something from her. So for you, it's really, how do I humble myself to a point where I am appealing to this person? And so personally, that kind of teaches you, okay, I'm not the most important person here. This customer is the most important person. So you take the focus out of yourself. And then I moved to advertising. And advertising is also, it's interesting because it kind of introduces you to the art and science parts of business or marketing. You know, I joined the advertising agency, and I just knew that we do ads. You get what I mean? But I joined as a client service person. And then you go for a client meeting, and then you hear the budget, and they're talking 400 million. And you're looking at everybody in the room like, what are we talking about here? You get what I mean? And so I think it opens your eyes to the fact that there is an art to business as well, you know. And there's a big part of that that's also about, you know, managing people. You've got to manage the creative team to deliver an objective for the clients. You've got to manage multiple clients in different sectors of the economy. So I think there's a kind of adaptability that you need to have. If you have a meeting in the morning, you're talking to somebody who does aluminum roofing sheets. In the afternoon, you're talking to a bank. In the night, you have a meeting with an airline. You get what I mean? And so therefore, in all of those meetings, you have to be the expert. You have to be the one that's convincing everyone that you know what is going on in all of those places. So I think, you know, there's something very versatile about that. And then you get to spend time with creative people. So you spend time on strategy, you spend time contributing to creative as well. I can also say I'm a failed copywriter, you know. At some point I felt like, I would write the copy myself, but you know, it really doesn't gel like that. So I think it's also fine to be a specialist and know that you can't do everything, and this is what I'm good at, and that's what I'm going to grow as my strength. I think there's that thing about your North Star and being clear about what am I really good at, and doing more of that versus looking at what I'm not really good at and spending all your time trying to be good at that thing, because you know, you can't be the best at everything. There are certain things that you're good for. And for me, it's really been communication, managing people, kind of turning strategies into execution, or turning ideas into strategy. And that's kind of where I focused my strength. And then, I mean, the other companies I work, Diageo, Coca-Cola, I mean, those are multinational companies. There's just there's a framework.
Correct.
There's a way you do things. There are global teams. There's also the sense of, you know, localizing what is global and making sure that you achieve the same objective, building campaigns that are relevant to the Nigerian consumer, because the Nigerian consumer is different from the Irish consumer.
Absolutely.
It's different from the American consumer. And all of that. So again, the dots that you connect there are quite different, because then you're talking about, what's the global view on this? What is the word that we are trying to say? What is our job to be done? And how do I localize it such that it makes sense to the Nigerian consumer? So, you know, there's a lot of that as well. And then, I mean, working in telco is also it's also different because it's a service business. And here it's all about the network. You know, the joke used to be you create an ad that you really like, but when people come to comment on it, they're abusing you because your network is bad. And that's the consumer experience. So, you know, I think if I look back now and I look at where I am right now, all those dots kind of prepare you for the future. And the more you connect those dots, the clearer that future becomes. You know, what am I going to do next? Am I going to be a GM or start my own, company or my own business based on the experiences that I have. So it's a journey, and it's exciting because it's a continuous journey. You don't know where it's going to end, but you kind of connect the dot backwards and say, because I did this, this, and this, maybe I can do this next. And so when you see that next opportunity, you're already in tune for it because you already know that that's what's coming. So
beautiful.
That's how connecting dots kind of fits into my own career path.
I think that makes sense because obviously you sort of built muscle. Build strength in various areas, working on various accounts at the agency, for example. But something stuck to me when you were speaking, which is around doing your core or service days. You were not going to sit down and not do anything, just get alawi, at the end of the month. What propelled you? What triggered that mindset? To be like, I need to get something doing. I do not just want to sit back.
I think if you look, for me, it comes from home. It comes from where I'm born. My father worked in the civil service. My mom always had something she was doing. So that sense of not being idle, that sense, and for me, I think it's also, you go to school, you graduate, and you get a job. And the energy that you should have, because that's when you can take risks. So I think I was very conscious of that. I'm serving, I'm in a new city, and I'm here to work. When I'm in school, but when I'm here to work, then it's time to work. So there's no considering it. Resting is not better than working, if you get what I mean. So for me, in my head, it's always been, okay, where's the work? Let's get it done. I have an interesting story from there, because when I finished service and I came back to Lagos, and I was like, I have to get a job. I need to work. And so for me, first thing was I looked at everyone in my contact list, and I sent my CV. I'm looking for a job. And for me, it was, let me send it to 1,000 people and see what comes back. And then I got a call that, okay, come and let's try you out for this agency. And when they told me how much they were going to pay me, it was ridiculous. I'm like, how am I supposed to survive on that? But for me, and that's what I see with a lot of young people, you've got to take away that pride. You've got to take away that sense, you can't pay me less than this because I'm a graduate. At the end of the day, you've got to be convinced about your own ability. When you put me in that situation, I'm going to give you my best. And if I put my best into it, I'm going to get something out of it. So I'm very optimistic. I'm a radical optimist, is what I would call it. So my first job did not pay me much, but my biggest point was, I'm going to leave this house. I'm not going to stay at home. So 2 months after I served, I got a job in an agency, and I just went for it. The pay was, a lot of people would understand that you're paid less than 20K at that time. But you do what you have to do. You get it done, because if you put all your efforts into it, you can change that very quickly. But I think it's saying yes to opportunities, looking beyond the current and looking at the big picture in terms of where it is that you want to go to. If you are clear about that, you would see, if you read the stories of people who have created stuff, people thought they were crazy. I'm sure you've seen the picture of Jeff Bezos in his garage. And, imagine what his neighbors would have said, like he sees he's starting a company. But look at him today. So I think it's that mindset of, this is where I am today, but I'm clear that this is not where I'm always going to be. You get? So for me, that's part of what drives me as well.
Beautiful. At what point did you come to that realization? Did you and how did you awaken that self-starting spirit or mindset?
Yeah, I think if you live in Nigeria, you might be privileged, maybe because your parents have money, but it's all around you if you live in Nigeria. The poverty is all around you. So for me, and I think that's part of what drives that Nigerian spirit, that sense that there's something chasing you, and therefore you've got to get up and run. And if you adopt that mindset from an early age, so for me it was, first of all, I did a 5-year course in school. You do a 5-year course, you're going to serve, and you're thinking of what's next in my life. Because, we were talking about it earlier, life is in phases, and when you're done with that secondary school, I'm young phase, I think for a guy, you become a man and say, what's the next phase? I need to move into that phase of, I'm a provider. I want to have my own place. I don't want to stay in my parents' place. You get what I mean? I want to have my own car. I want to be able to move around town and do the things I want to do. And for me, the way to get there is hard work. So you've got to then double down on, what am I doing now to get me to where I want to go. So when I see people who are working hard and who are working with that positive energy, and if you look around you, you would always find someone. It could be a guy who owns a shop, who's selling things. It could even be your mechanic. But when someone has the right attitude to work, if you look at their story, you kind of see that they don't stay in one place for a long time. They move. You get what I mean? And so for me, seeing that around me growing up already told me. So when I went to serve, and I had friends who just wanted to sleep and, play around, meet girls and do all of that. And it's not like you don't do those things, but I think you've got to be clear on your focus and what you're doing. It's like when I was in school as well, you have guys who have carryover, and what are you doing in all of that time? You're not reading, you're not studying, you're not trying to get it done. You get it? And for me, it's making sure that I don't end up like that and saying, hey, I'm in school to get a degree. A degree takes 4 years or 5 years, depending on the course. I'm not going to spend a day longer. I'm not going to go and not do what I'm supposed to do. You get what I mean? To then waste my time and not achieve my objective. So that's kind of what has always driven me with everything I do, to say I've got a goal, I've got to do my best to get it done and be able to move on to the next phase. Because for me, it's always about what's next. Okay, I've done this now, what's next? If you look at Dangote, I mean, he's a billionaire. Why does he have to build a refinery, really? He doesn't owe anybody that. He can just go to an island in the south of France and live the rest of his life, and we would still talk about him as successful. But why do you then move from cement to sugar to oil to flour because it's that sense of I gotta keep going. What's next? What's next? You reach one mountain, what's the next mountain to climb? Because you can always put a mountain ahead of you. I mean, look at Elon Musk. And maybe for me, I'm talking about those people because those are the kind of people I look up to say, this guy could have just done PayPal. He sold PayPal for I don't know how many million, but he was already a millionaire at that point. But no, I want to change the world. I want to move people to space. I want to do electric cars. There's all the stuff that he's done that kind of shows you that you've got to be resilient. You've got to be almost irrational, if you get what I mean. So that's the energy that I try to apply, I mean, in my own space, of course.
Looking at where you sit now as the marketing director, it means that you work with cross-functional teams, production, the sales guys themselves, the agencies creating the copies, the content, and those sort of things, dissect, putting that, what you do, right, in the center, and looking at the kind of data you have, how would you, what has worked, for you so far, at Danone, in ensuring that you keep, improving, growing bottom line, and there's also return on investment, and the vendors are happy, looking at it from that marketing director point of view, and the kind of stakeholders that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point in that. So marketing is at the heart of every business, and so a good marketing person has to be a good communicator, has to be somebody who's able to, like we said earlier about connecting the dots. Connecting the dots means you're seeing patterns and you're able to link the outcome that the business wants with the patterns that you're seeing. So like you said, marketing is at the heart of it. You work with people in sales, you work with innovation, you work with research, you work with the agencies that are talking to the consumers, you work with trade because you need to know the trade, you work with consumers. If you're a marketing person and you're not talking to consumers every day, you're not really doing your job because your job is that consumer space. Trends are changing, what are people talking about, what is new to them, and how do you bring all of that? I think the role of data, I mean, again, it's not to overemphasize. I mean, we've seen how everything has moved now to data analysis and all of that. I'm very mindful of that because people are not numbers. You get what I mean? And so it's to be careful to say, you get, people are not numbers. You can use the numbers, but you still need to tell stories. You still need to connect to human beings, and we are made for connection. So when we talk about data, for me, it has to be within that context of it's helping us make decisions better, but we also have to look at other data points. I had someone who used to say research is not God. You get what I mean? So at the end of the day, don't take it as God. Use your understanding of your environment as well, and don't look at data in isolation. So I think to your point, it's to be able to say, what is the data that I need to make the right decisions for the business. it's qualitative, it's quantitative. I know I have 11,000 vendors. If you want to break that down by region, I can say in Lagos I have this, in the north I have this, in the east I have this, in the west I have this. Where is my opportunity to drive growth in terms of the number of vendors that I have? Where do I need bicycles? Where do I need push carts? So there's a lot of data that you can get from just going to the field, bringing it in and saying, hey, based on the patterns that we have. Sometimes you can even decide based on this demographic. I mean, let's say you're in Victoria Island or you're in Lekki. Do I need to sell the same products in Victoria Island and Lekki that I'm going to sell in some other part in Ibadan, for example, or in another part of Lagos as well? So that I can then say, you know what, in this kind of shop, or if this kind of vendor is going to this place, let him take the higher value items that are there. If somebody stops you now and says this thing is 500, you're not going to think twice about it. But there are parts of Lagos where nobody is going to buy anything for 500. They want something that's 100 naira and 50 naira. Yeah. So it's using the data that I know to say, hey, how can I then say in your box, let me be able to suggest the right products or SKUs or sizes that you're going to put in there, such that if I go to Victoria Island, what I would see is not the same thing as I would see if I go to Alagbado, just because the people are different, their needs are different, the way they think about it is different. So for us, it's really and it's personalization to some degree. And from a marketing perspective, I think personalization is one of the biggest shifts, that marketing has had to make. When Ford started making cars, there's that joke about him saying, hey, you can have any car you want as long as it's black, But now look at the kinds of cars that you have. There's a car for the family, there's a car for the single individual. So personalization in every aspect of marketing, I think, is one of those big trends that you've got to note. So for us, that's really where the data kind of leads us to, because then it's more effective. Then, to my earlier point, you're giving the consumer what they want. You get what I mean? Using the ecosystem that you have, the research, the vendors, the sales, and all of that. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, it sounds like what you do is fun.
Yeah, you've got to make it fun. There's a fun side to it, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I also look back at some of the works, you've done in the past.
Yeah.
There was Mama the Mama with Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
You had the Copa Lagos, where you had like a JJ Okocha.
Yeah.
These guys in complete football with the boys. When you think back, right, at your journey as well, what are those characteristics, or ethics, that you would say that were your guiding principles, that sort of helped you become the person that you are today?
Yeah. No, I would say, values, first of all, the value of integrity. Just, being truthful, doing what you say you'll do, and not being, you've just got to be a straight kind of person, because that's how you build your own network. People need to know you for something and know that, if I put this person in charge of this is how they're going to do it. So integrity is extremely important. I think the ability to also navigate complexity, navigate complexity in the sense that change, and it's easier said than done, but change is constant. Things can change very quickly. So adaptability is critical for me as something that I, go by. So I'm very adaptable to what does the business want to do? Not what have I been working on for the past 3 months, and because it has changed now, I'm unhappy. No, I've had projects that were big projects that I was handling. My boss comes and says, it looks like there's going to be a new direction, we're no longer doing this thing. And you've put all your sweat and your blood into it, but it's time to change. And so I tell my boss, okay, boss, so what are we doing next? Is there a new brief that we need to work on? And I think a lot of people are not able to make that switch because we personalize work and make it seem like, I've been working, No, if the business direction changes, be ready to change. And I think, so overriding all of that is a positive mindset, which is everything I'm doing, you can make the best out of it. I really believe if life throws you lemons, you make lemonade out of it. You get what I mean? So it's really, okay, there's a challenge, there's a problem to solve. There's no problem that is not solvable. I kind of go in with that mindset. It's just, if I go in with a positive mindset, then I feel like I will get a positive outcome. So I kind of stay in that positive mindset space. And you can do that without, and I have a point of view on emotional intelligence as well, in terms of building and being able to know yourself well and removing or being able to separate emotion from work. I find that that's something that a lot of people,
I think it's a big problem.
Actually, a lot of people tend to struggle with. And I feel it comes from how you see yourself. If I get into a situation where, you know, someone is annoying me, you know, or doing something that I find annoying, I think it's to go back to, it's not about the person. There has to be a reason why. It's about the work. So let's make it about the work. And therefore, you're quickly able to get over yourself and not get in the way or get in your own way when you're trying to get things done. So I think self-awareness as a component of emotional intelligence is critical, because once you do that, and I think it's also understanding people and what they want. You know, if I have a boss or I have a line manager who's going to do something, I've got to learn how they like to work. And I'm adaptable to that, because my job, if you want to summarize it, is to make my boss happy. I'm just saying that from So the question is, how does this person want to work? Because I trust the process that makes that person my boss. I'm somebody who just trusts the process. If I come into a team and everybody at the team was recruited before me, and I'm supposed to now be the leader of that team, I don't think there's somebody who wasn't meant to be here. I feel like everybody is where they're meant to be, and what got that person to where they are, there's a process. Everyone has a journey in that process. So where you're at a particular time is where you're meant to be. I strongly believe that. So if I have somebody who's my line manager, that person is my line manager because that's where that person is supposed to be. And so I'm supposed to take my guidance from that person. So, and that person and I have a common objective. There's no boss who doesn't want his business to succeed. You get what I mean? He can't not want the business to succeed, irrespective of how he goes about it. And so for me, I want to tap into what is it that you want, because you want to succeed and I want to succeed. And when I find that space, it might be a very small space, but once I find that space, then I will connect to that. You get what I mean? So you want us to, if I understand your personality and I see that you're a boss who maybe would like to get an update from me on WhatsApp every day with everything that's happening, then I get on my WhatsApp and activate it more. Boss, this is what we are doing now. This is where we are now. This is where we are going to. Should I call you? Do you want an update? I think it's just to learn how to build that relationship, you know. And it's not just with your boss. It's also across people. And for me, it's really around how you make sure that you're integrating yourself with people. Build a personal relationship with everybody. If you work in marketing, there's somebody in finance that, there are people in finance that if I call them at 10 in the night and I say, sorry, I need your help with this thing, they are willing to do it, not because of your position or because of, you know, the fact that their boss asked them to, but because they want to help you. Well. They want to work with you. And for me, I find that more valuable than position or hierarchy or anything. You know, it's interesting because if you work as marketing director level, there is probably somebody who is an assistant finance manager who can give you what you want better than the finance director. So I'm not going to be calling the finance director. I'm going to look for someone in his team that I know I vibe with and say, hey, can we work on this thing together? And that also helps for learning as well. So if you work in an organization, for me, what has worked is if I don't understand something, I kind of go down to the nitty-gritty of this meeting that we had. So if I'm in a meeting and you're using words I don't understand, I'm going to call you after. And no matter what level you are, to say, hey, can I teach you? Can you teach me this thing? Can I learn this thing from you? I think it teaches you humility. It helps you to be able to navigate the system such that the fact that you are high up there doesn't mean that the guy who people will consider to be at the lower level is not going to be able to teach you something. And when you're like that with people, I think they trust you more. They recognize your authenticity more, and so they are able to relate with you more. And that way you can navigate an organization anyhow. There are things that if my boss asks me now and says, hey, I need you to get me this thing, I know 3 or 4 people I'll call. If I need to get them in a room together, and you know, it's what do they like? If I say, guy, let's buy suya, let's just sit down, let's do this thing for 1 hour. I already get you to a place where you want to do the work with me. And for me, the ability to do that is priceless. So you've got to learn how to, and to be able to be like that, there's a certain level of humility you have to have. There's a certain level of removing yourself and your ego from the situation. Ego is a big problem. You get what I mean? And so for me, I'm quickly able to take it and squash, whatever pride or ego and say, hey, I've got to learn this thing. I've got to get this thing done. Let me get to what I need to get done, because it's about the outcome.
It is.
You get, and you've got to use the process to reach an outcome. So it's to bend where I need to bend it, but I'm focused on that outcome, and then you get it done. That's kind of how I, navigate the organizations that I've worked. So wherever I work, who are the people that I need to have? What do I need to know, first of all? Because every business is different.
Correct.
You get what I mean? If you work in telco and you move to a company that's selling beer, you've got to learn beer and understand how beer works. You've got to become the beer guy. And I think becoming is also an important concept in itself. It's who do I have to become to be the best at my job? And what are the elements of that? What does that mean? Because once you become that person, then the rest of it is easy. But if you spend your time not becoming who you need to become, then you might have some gaps because you're focused on tasks versus, hey, I need to be somebody who's more, if I move into a director role or I move into a role where I need to communicate more and connect more with people, then I have to become somebody who connects more with people. So if I wasn't doing that before, guess what? Now I have to do that now. If I was only, saying hi to someone on the staircase, now I have to get their number and send them a WhatsApp message and, build the relationship with them. So I think it's giving it what it requires. And what it requires differs from company to company, from role to role, from what you're doing now to, whatever you were doing in the past or the future. So adaptability, I think, is critical. How do I adapt myself to my new environment and become who I need to become to succeed in what I'm doing at that point in time?
Beautiful. I'm glad that you talked about becoming. And that's because it takes so much of introspection.
Yeah.
You need to be able to take yourself out of the situation.
Yes.
And visualize, imagine it.
Yeah.
Before putting steps.
Yeah.
To it. How? So let's pick your transitioning from the agency.
Yeah.
To working with Diageo, for example.
Yeah.
A multinational company.
Yeah.
At that time, right? What did you have to do? How did you become? That brand manager. I think it was brand support manager, then brand manager.
So brand support manager is assistant brand manager. No, I think for me, it's you. There's also a point of realization when you work somewhere. You start your career and you're not struggling, but you're learning. You're learning the ropes. I'm understanding what advertising is about. I'm understanding the role that we play as client services, the way the client is structured, the way the organization is structured. And by the time you come to that realization, you just realize, okay, now I get everything that we're doing and end to end. And it's interesting. I went for a meeting with a boss at the time, and the client was kind of trying to bounce ideas off us. So it was asking us for ideas about something, and I just went into it because I was excited. I had done some thinking before we came for the meeting, and I just kept going on. We can do this. And my boss had to tap me on that table. Like, what we do is we sell.
Yeah, we sell those ideas.
We sell these ideas. So why are you so excited and feeling yourself and getting it? And so for me, that was when I came to the realization that, okay, I'm at a point now where my boss is telling me, don't sell all your ideas, which means I am bringing something to the table. You get what I mean? And so for me, when you come to that realization, then it becomes, is this the best I can do? I'm restless in that sense. Yeah.
So for you, it was about realizing that there's more value in this that could be beneficial to the business.
Yes.
You didn't see it as, you didn't want me to speak at the meeting.
No, I saw that. For me, it was, so not speaking at the meeting, I understand, because we have to sell the ideas. I want to sell and make sure that I'm selling the ideas. But at that point, I wasn't cognizant of that fact. I was just being somebody I was eager to show value. That I have value to add. And so my boss stopping me from talking confirmed that to me. Like, okay, I am now at a place where we have to go into an inner meeting and do the plans, and my ideas will be valuable. And I think you also can't divorce changing roles from, where you are economically as well, because there's always going to be that sense of, okay, at every point in time, you should get the value for who you have become. That's absolutely important to me. So if I have become somebody, if I'm earning 100K, and I find that I have become somebody that brings value of 500K, I have to earn that 500K. You get what I mean? If I value myself at that 100K, I'm doing a disservice to myself. You get what I mean? And I think there's a way you sense check and know, okay, who have I become now? Where am I now? And then
how do you sense check that?
No, I think there are signs that show you. So I gave you an example of that. So part of my early journey was also I resigned from the company I wanted to work. I was working for, because they were paying me a certain amount, and I felt like, okay, I've worked here long enough. I calibrate my value and say, look, based on what I bring to the table, I think I should be earning more. I think there's a way you just know. When you see how much work you are giving versus your peers, when you see the outcome of the work that you do versus everybody else, you just get. And the other way to sense check is that, I go and I do an interview somewhere and they're willing to pay me double what I'm earning. Okay. And I'm like, okay, that's evidence that my value. And then I come back and my company says, no, you're not going to go. We are going to pay you double. So you could pay me double before, but if I don't ask for it, you don't get it. You get what I mean? So for me, it's once you become aware of that, then you do that again and calibrate. Now, there's also, I go into every job with, what do I want to learn? What do I want to get from this experience? And I try to give myself a couple of benchmarks to say, when I get to this point, I would know that I have been able. So if I'm a brand manager, for example, and I've never run a campaign before, and then I get into an experience where I build a campaign from the start, I write the brief to the agency, I brief the agencies, I get to work out, and everybody says the work is wow. I have grown. I have evolved, because before I started, I hadn't gotten there, but now that is in my back pocket.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So I'll dial back a little. What's growing up like for you, if you think about it now?
Growing up for me, I mean, like every Nigerian kid, growing up in Nigeria, and I think it's when you look back that you realize that you have a lot of fun growing up. You get what I mean? Growing up is in retrospect when you connect the dots backward. But growing up for me, I grew up in an estate. There were a lot of kids in there. So, playtime was playtime. There was no mobile phones, as I'm sure you can relate. So for us, it was riding bicycles, playing football, playing catcher, running around the place. And for me, it was a very fulfilling childhood. If you look back now, because you grew up with a lot of friends.
Correct.
Community, that sense of community. And like I said, real play. Nowadays, everybody's on their mobile phone. People don't play as much as they used to then. But I think as kids, there's value in play. There's value in also, I mean, you see the value of school as well when you look back now. And Nigeria, I mean, school was something that it's when you look back now that you see the value of how we learned, what we learned. You get what I mean? There are places you go to, and when you speak and you compare yourself to other people, you realize the value of growing up in Nigeria and, learning how to learn under pressure, doing tests and, getting corrected by your parents. While you're in that, you might feel like, it's not adding value. But when you look back now, you're like, oh, thank God I grew up the way I grew up with a lot of discipline, around me, such that, in some of the waywardness you hear about now, you couldn't even try it then. It was not even an option. You get what I mean? The path was straight and narrow. You had the value of our culture and how we discipline children. So for me, that was a big part of my childhood. So I mean, looking back, it was a lot of fun, growing up back then.
Sweet. Yeah. So fast forward to when you studied environmental management and toxicology.
Yeah.
I mean, it does not necessarily relate to what you're doing now.
Let me give the Nigerian answer. That's the course they gave me, so to speak. But I think it's yes. I mean, if you look at what university is meant to be, for me, it's really discipline. That's all you take out of university. If you go and study engineering in UI and you go and work in Chevron, you're not going to use one of the things they taught you in engineering class. But what they take you for is your ability to learn, your ability to adapt. And you have a BSc shows that you have the discipline to start and finish and do it in 4 years or 5 years or however long it is. You went to class, they taught you something, you learned it, you wrote it down. You did the first year, you did the second year. They increased the value of what they were teaching you, and you were able to finish and get a degree. What that tells the employer is, if I teach this guy something, he's going to get it. Do you understand what I mean? So I don't think the course that you do matters at all. I studied environmental management and toxicology. It's a very valuable course. Toxicology is the science of poisons, you know, pesticides, petrol, what's the effect on the environment and all of that. And I think a science background also helps from a marketing perspective. But I know people who are engineers who are doing marketing. I know people who are, you get what I mean? So I think at the end of the day, when you look back at it, it's really the discipline of being able to learn. Because the question is, where have you used Pythagoras theorem in your life right now? But you learned how to follow a process and arrive at a result. And I think those are the elements that our education kind of give us, so that when you get into another environment, that same thought process that helped you to use that to solve problems helps you to say, how do I solve a problem, and how do I train my brain to do that? So for me, that's what that was. But marketing, sales, I feel like everybody needs to know how to sell. And I feel like some of it is also then your personality type. So your education is one thing, but what kind of person are you? You know, you can look at some of the comedians that you see. When you see the courses they read, you're wondering, why did this person, you know, read this course? I mean, Fowles is a lawyer. Yeah. You get what I mean? But his personality type, he's well fit into entertainment, comedy, he writes rap, and all of that. So I think the course just enhances your knowledge in general. You get what I mean? And you can also hone in on a subject and understand the subject well, but it's more your ability to think than anything else. So for me, that serves me in that I understand science. So when I talk to the research people or my innovation people, and they're talking about, you know, products and emulsifiers and stabilizers and all of that, I can throw in one or two words and say, hey, this is what this is. So do you need this? Because I can understand the process of creating a product, because I understand some of the chemistry that's involved in it. And I feel like it would be the same thing if somebody worked or somebody studied international relations and is in marketing, for example. Helps you to understand how, you know, how does this product work in a different market. I think your understanding of international relations might be able to help you in there. Same thing for all the other courses that people do, that you can always relate it to something that you're doing. And the field of marketing is exactly that kind of field where, irrespective of where you're coming from, you will find, if you're an engineer and you can science, you know, marketing is art and science, magic and logic, if you like. And if you're an engineer, the logic side will not be a problem for you, because you can connect the dots from that perspective. So I feel like marketing is the kind of course where, irrespective of what you learned, and if you're somebody who maybe learned something in the creative arts or mass comm, you get what I mean? There are elements in media, there are elements in the creative side of marketing, understanding perspective and all of that I think come in. So yeah.
I think that's super insightful to learn from you. I was going to quickly dial into some conversations around, you know, what has helped you in terms of, you know, life stage.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you said earlier, the stages in life. Yeah. You know, when you got to a stage where you wanted to become a father. Yeah. You know, how were you able to sort of manage that? You know, and also then manage your career.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting. I didn't expect that question, but I think it's, like I said, life is in phases, and I think you've got to also be able to detach from a phase when it's time to detach from that phase. I think a lot of people find it hard to detach from a phase, but you've got to be pragmatic. You're born, and one day you're going to die. That's what happens to every human being that has been born since the beginning of time. You get what I mean? So I think if you're frank with yourself, then you know that, okay, when I'm a kid, I'm a kid, and when I become an adult, I'm an adult, and when I become a senior citizen or an elderly person. I mean, you can break it down into different phases. So for me, there is a phase where you decide, hey, you know, it's time, and if you're lucky to meet the right person at that time, then, you know, you also take it from it's a new phase of life, you know, and of course, you know, getting married and having kids is the desire of most people, not everybody, and I don't think it should be everybody who wants that, but that was always something that I wanted. My parents were married for 48 years or thereabouts. I grew up in an estate where everybody had parents who were married, so for me, growing up, that was a big impression of, you know, a phase in life that you will get to. And so you get into that phase. So there's that conversation around work-life balance.
Correct.
And, you know, there's that argument around, is it work-life balance or is it work-life integration? You get what I mean? Because your work is a big part of your life.
It is.
You get what I mean? So I think getting married to somebody who understands what you do and understands, you know, maybe there are times when you'll not be at home, maybe there are times when you need somebody who's able to understand you fully and integrate, you know, their lives into your lives, because that's the only way that it's ever going to work. So there are times when you have to travel, for example, therefore, you know, your wife has to hold forth, and it might be your wife that needs to travel, and then you adjust to what that is. So, you know, somebody said marrying the right person is a life hack. You get what I mean? Because that's important. So once you do that, then, I mean, and then shared values in terms of how you want to raise the kids, and what's the importance of what it is that I am doing. So therefore, if I have to travel for 2 weeks or I have to travel for 3 weeks, then we know, we agree and arrange how it is that we're going to do that. So for me, I think work-life integration is more around, I'm not separating the two, in the sense that, you know, this is work and this is home, and so when I get home, I don't touch my laptop. I don't know. I integrate it. But how do I and my wife bring each other into each other's world, such that I can show her a creative and say, what do you even think about this? I can talk about what's happening at work. And so it's not to then come home and say, no, I'm not going to talk about work when I get home. No, we can have a fun conversation about work. It helps me understand what she does better. It helps her understand what I do better. And therefore, if I tell her I'm at a shoot where we are shooting a TVC, she's clear that, okay, no, this thing you are doing is important. So are you guys done? When are you going to finish? Oh, you're shooting overnight. Yes. How do you guys do it when you shoot overnight? So there's an interest in what you're doing, because you've got to communicate as much as possible as well. I mean, to the degree that the person will understand. You get what I mean? So for me, it's been good, because, you know, you marry your friend. I married somebody who understands what I do, who's very much in tune with that. So there are a lot of things that I'll bounce off my wife to say, hey, I'm going to this meeting. Well, how do you think I should? You get what I mean? And you take that opinion and you bring that in. So for me, it's integrated. Everybody understands. My kids know what I do. I show them some ads and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? What do you like about this? And they'll tell you, and then you use that to also form the opinion, because, you know, connecting dots, sometimes you want to get opinions of people that are outside of your space, because sometimes, because we are all into it, we all have opinions, but you show somebody else and they're like, no, I don't see what you're talking about. And you're like, oh, okay, because you're so deep into it. So that is how, for me, work life and married life is integrated.
How do you then draw the balance? You know, obviously, there are high performers of workplace, you know, and there are people that are not necessarily high performers. Yeah. You know, how do you, as a director now, you know, as a manager, sort of help them draw the balance? Or what do you look out for in people, you know, that you work with, to ensure that that standard of professionalism, quality, you know, is delivered on a daily basis?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm of the school of thought, like I said earlier. That's why I talked about trusting the process. You know, there's a reason why somebody got into an organization, even if I'm not the person that recruited the person. And, you know, ideally, if you don't fit into that organization, you will find your way out of it naturally. That's also part of the process as well. So for me, I think the first thing is to be able to empathize. People are different. And therefore, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are people you work with that need you to explain things to them very clearly. And that's something that I am also learning to do more. And there are people who don't want you to explain to them. Just tell me the outcome you want, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to figure it out my own way. And there's room for both people. You get what I mean? And it doesn't mean that one is more effective than the other. It just means that these are different people. So for me, on a team, you would have your high performers. And typically, your high performers in an organization will be, if it's max, let's say 20% of the organization. Most people fall in the middle where, we are getting work. And those people are critical to the organization as well. And then you have the bottom performers who might be 10 to 5% of the people. So on your team, you can imagine like that. So if I have somebody on my team who's not performing up to scratch, I think it's first of all to empathize. Why? Now, if you're lazy, that's a problem because you're just not putting your best into it. But if this person is dedicated to work, and it might just be that some people don't know how to break down complex work, and therefore they stare at the elephant, and the elephant stays an elephant versus cut it into bits and pieces. And so I'll help you with that. Some people are also, perfectionism is a form of procrastination as well. You're trying to get it perfect, and therefore you haven't done it. But it's due by Friday. You get what I mean? And so for me, it's to help people recognize that don't get it perfect. Done is better than perfect. Just get it to a point where it's done, and you can share with me and say, I'm not 100% done, but this is what I have. But don't wait until that Friday and then show me that, because you're also, you're making it, you're feeling like what you're doing is not good enough. And most times it is actually good enough. You can actually show how you think about something or show how you thought about it. And sometimes that's enough to say, okay, this guy gets what he's doing, and ask for guidance when you need guidance. So I think it's to empathize with that person and kind of bring that person up to the level of work that you need the person to get to. But you also need to manage consequences. If you try that with somebody and the person maybe is just not up to scratch in terms of what is required. Unfortunately, the organization is a moving train. There's an objective. You have a manager who has a manager who has a manager to that point. And so at some point, you've got to manage that consequence. So sometimes you will bring out the deadlines. I want to see, and for people like that I've managed in the past, is also to say, let's review every day. I want to see what you're doing today. And by the end of today, let me show me what you've done on it. You also have people who are so distracted at work, they're checking their phones, they're not able to focus. And so it's to be able to say, hey, you need to focus more on work. Therefore, remove the distractions. This is just advice, because ideally, you are supposed to manage your workload by yourself. And so if you have work to do, put your phone in a locker, log out for a while. It helps to focus on the work. I have people who think on PowerPoints. That's also difficult to do. Shut it down, think on it. I mean, again, that's what I do.
Correct. Looking at your journey.
Yeah.
Is there or was there any step you took and you sort of wished that you didn't take it, and why? Career-wise.
Steps that I took that I wish I didn't take. That's an interesting question. So if it's about regrets, I think it'll be the times when you maybe let the situation get to you. There are times when, because I felt like, hey, this thing we are working on is not going to come anywhere. Therefore, you actually don't put your all into it. You get what I mean? And that was earlier in my career, and I started to realize that, it's not the way to go, irrespective of what I think about it. I learned the principle of disagree and commit. You get what I mean? I don't agree with this direction that we are going with, but I'm committed to it. Therefore, if you're saying this is the direction, because I trust the process that makes you the one that makes that decision, then I'll go with it. I think when I started my career, it was that sense of, if I disagree, then you might not see 100% from me, because I think, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
You get what I mean? And so I had to change that around as well when I had situations where I felt like it wasn't paying me. So it now became a situation where, okay, I disagree, but I commit. I learned that somewhere, and it helped me to say, I can also be clear to you that I don't 100% agree, but if this is what you said we're going to do, let's go ahead and do it because that's your role in there. So if I look back, I mean, that's the kind of behavior that I think I walked through and changed for myself.
Man, sweet. Because when I try to connect the dots back to what you said around, being able to give your best regardless of what you think about, taking out emotions, focusing more on what the goal is, what the objective is, and it also sort of helps with maybe teamwork.
And I think we underestimate how much emotion plays in that whole workplace dynamic, because there's a lot of it. So the more you learn to kill it and focus on what the focus is, then you actually see. So if my MD says, hey, this is the new business, we're going to start selling chickens, and I can say, why are we selling chickens? And we can talk about it, but I can say, okay, guys, we are now the chicken sellers. This is how we are going to sell chicken. Do you get what I mean? And so it's being able to make that shift to say, hey, once I am clear on why we are doing it, there's always a reason. It might not be one I agree with, but I will take that and ride on it and then see. Because if you take that attitude to everything, you will find yourself in a situation one day where you have to tell your team that, what I'm telling you guys to do now, even though I don't agree. But I have to own it as somebody who works in the organization to say, this is the new direction, guys. You get what I mean? So I think that's something that I've kind of worked on myself to learn and get better at as well.
That's beautiful, because it's a very strong trait, I believe. I mean, thinking about it, it just helps make life easy. Makes work move smoother and all of those things. As we wrap up, I want to get a sense of what your vision for Africa is.
I mean,
as a whole.
No, Africa as a whole, marketing, I think for me it's less poverty. The story of Africa needs to change. We do a lot of talk about what needs to change in Africa, but there's not a lot of do about what needs to change. If you look at Nigeria, you have 30 million children out of school. You have a birth rate of 2.6%. We give birth to 5 million babies every year, and we are not educating all of them. So for me, we need to get to a place, and I'm hoping that this generation and the younger generation kind of comes into that. I feel like that's when it's going to happen. The stories are old, sickness, the kind of corruption that we see where people steal all of the money that's meant to develop everyone. I don't think that's going to continue for long. So I hope that in my lifetime we start to see the real energy of the youthfulness of Africa. I mean, median age in Nigeria is 17. You have a youthful population. And so the question is, how do we harness that? And how do we use technology to educate our people? If you look at all the guys that you see on the streets, there's got to be some way you can bring everyone together and teach them the basics and let them just understand. It doesn't have to be a full school curriculum like maybe you and I went through, but how do I take the guys on the streets and use technology to kind of disseminate education to them? Education is critical to the future of Nigeria and Africa, educating young people. And I think there's no better time than now where technology is pervasive to get that done. But I mean, the dream for Africa is to get to a place where you can really compete. Now we contribute, I think it's 3% Africa contributes to world trade. That's not significant, that's nothing. And yet you have all these resources and all of these things there. So it's really killing the corruption and starting to harness the best of Africa, because there's a lot here to get from. You get what I mean? And using the people and the value of the people. Nigeria, we say it's 200 million people. That's a lot of people. And they are young people. So it's using that energy to kind of make things better for the future generation. That's where I think Africa should be going to.
Fantastic. I mean, GB, it's been a fantastic time.
It has. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for the insights and the conversation.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Thanks, man. Cheers.